Hey, this is Oteil. If you're liking what you're hearing, head on over to patreon.com/comesatimepod and get your bus pass for an extra episode every week.
Hey, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Comes a Time podcast. That is Oteil.
And that is Mike. Actually, this is the old Oteil. I'm not sure is still around there. One part's been let on vacation.
Yeah. Oteil's gone fishing. So we we used to kind of say after every episode, this might be my favorite episode. This might be my favorite episode. I kind of think this one's in contention for maybe. We had Dr. Schwartz, Dick Schwartz, founder of the IFS Institute, Internal Family Systems, an absolute game changer in the world of psychotherapy, mental health, how to address it, how to approach it, how to acknowledge and identify and accept and work on the many parts that make us up and who we are. And we talk about mental health quite a bit on this podcast, and we try our best to be as vulnerable and as open as we can be. And I've tried this therapy. It's been unbelievably beneficial to me in just accepting that I am who I am. And there are no bad parts. And and just to be able to have him on this podcast is just like an absolute mind-blowing experience. I'm genuinely thrilled the way that this came out.
I think you were correct as we were talking off camera, so to speak, that in the future, I think they're going to really see this guy as like the next Freud. He's that big. It will, with time, it's going to happen. He did a little, I don't want to say session, but he was like, "You want to try it, Oteil?" And I was just like, inside I was like, no way. I do not want to do this on camera. I'm not even sure it'll work. He's so beautiful and just so calm. He's like, well, let's just try.
Yeah.
And he just asked me a simple question. And it's not any big thing. It's very just direct. He said, what's your pain? Well, what does it make you do? So you get to zero in on this part,
Mm-hmm.
And really something really, really enlightening revelation. Why it just seems too easy to be true.
Yeah. Yep.
Right.
Great point. I mean, totally. And the word relief is an understatement. Like when we were we talk about language during this, and you brought up something you took the words out of my mouth, and I'm so glad you did, because the way that we discuss this stuff, right? Mental health and therapy and psychotherapy and all of this, there's insurance, there's Medicare, there's documentation of a diagnosis in order to get payment and blah, blah, blah. And then there's the mystic and the religious and the vast world in between, and how it
Which you're not going to get covered by insurance.
Oh God, no. But that idea of just having a feeling of just relief from yourself, or relief from the work that our parts have to do, or relief from the pain. There's a thing that it's indescribable, and it's tears, and it's a feeling of empathy for yourself and a feeling of compassion for yourself that I think, unfortunately, a large percentage of people may never be open to feel. And it's not even encouraged. It's discouraged. No, right.
Stiff upper lip.
Yeah, and that's crazy.
Stiff upper lip. That is crazy.
Yeah, it is. It absolutely is.
But this guy is a scientist. He's been doing this for 40 years. He discovered this. It'll be 40 years next year. Yeah. And over time, it's worked over and over and over again. So there's empiricism as well.
Yep.
And so it's not, it's not like a new religion that he started or something. This is scientific, but it has to involve things that necessarily can't be quantified scientifically, but the results can.
Right.
It's really beautiful.
And what's amazing about this particular, mode of psychotherapy is that as the therapist, he's just the guide. He's just saying, let me help you do the work. And I think that if for maybe folks who have been turned off by the wrong therapist, or you hear a lot of people that maybe, you tried it, you didn't like it, it's therapy's like dating. You got to keep getting back on the horse. I mean, it might not be the best right off the bat. IFS is like, I don't know. It's a journey, and it's important because it doesn't take very long to know that it's working.
Yeah. I mean, I knew instant, like just the basic concept of, there's a part of you that drives you to what? Overeat, watch porn,
be angry at people,
use heroin, drink too much, whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. So he says, let's get to know that part instead of trying to kill that part or make the part stop or beat it into submission or whatever. Like, ask the part, and then you find out this part has been trying to protect you since you were a kid. In fact, the part still thinks you're a kid. Right. The part's still a kid, and it's just like, wow. So when I was able to get in touch with that, for immediately like feeling like this part is my enemy, it's always making me do something that hurts me, I felt gratitude. I was like, wow, thank you for like being on the job 24/7 trying to protect me
for decades.
Even though I'm not 12 anymore, and you're not 12 anymore. It just got off track, out of bounds, because we're taught to not listen to it. Ask it. Like, it's worn out. You think you're worn out. It's worn out, like trying to protect you. And it's just, what a radically different approach.
And you know what? I think the tears and the relief, Oteil, come when that part goes, you care how I feel?
Yeah.
You actually
go, Thank
care.
You, part.
You actually care how I feel? You care that I've been on my feet for 36 years? Like, you care that I've been scared to blink because if I do, you'll die? For the past 36, I can't sleep.
Sleeping with one eye open.
And you go, how would you like to be? What would you like to do in here? I mean, that's when that relief thing, that washes over you. That's the stuff that we all need to. That's what we've talked about, meeting love or accessing that light or whatever it may be. Like those moments, man. This is the podcast.
That part,
if that's what you're,
that part is able to do what it was originally created for, which is a positive job.
Love.
Yeah.
Instead of fear.
Yeah. Now, and we have a bunch of parts. So now we got a whole team.
It's a love party.
To like, let's do this. It's great. You guys just got to watch this one.
Yeah.
You just got to watch this one.
Dr. Schwartz, we can't thank you enough for spending time with us. And it's ifs-institute.com, Oteil?
Yes, ifs-institute.com.
Excellent. Well, please check it out, folks. And this world is hard and this world is shit. So please, please, please take care of yourselves and be kind to each other. And thank you for listening. We hope that this is as helpful to you guys as it was for us. You can find us over on patreon.com/comesatimepod for bonus content, which we'll be talking about this for sure. And thank you for, and we're here on Osiris, home to so many great podcasts. So check out osirispod.com. Thank you, everybody, and enjoy. Bye-bye. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you here, and we've been really excited to chat with you. There seems to be so many incredible moves forward in the world of mental health and counseling and various different theories and practices and internal family systems is one of the most exciting out there at the moment, really.
How did you come up with this? You've developed this back in the 80s, is that what I understand?
That's right, yeah. I was all excited to be a family therapist back then. I'd gotten a PhD in that, and I thought we'd found the Holy Grail, that family therapy could take care of everything, and decided to prove that. And so did an outcome study, made the mistake of trying to prove it, did an outcome study with bulimia. I had gather about 30 bulimic kids and their families and reorganized the families just the way the book said to. And my clients didn't realize they'd been cured because they kept binging and purging. And so out of frustration, I started asking why. And they started talking this crazy, to me at the time, crazy language of parts. And they would say, there was this critic that drives me crazy and attacks me whenever anything happens that's bad in my life. And then that brings up a part that can make me feel totally worthless and empty and alone and young and scared. And that feeling is so horrible that in comes the binge to take me away from that feeling.
Wow.
But then the binge brings back the critic who's calling me a pig on top of the other names. And then that brings back that young, empty, worthless feeling. So the binge has to come back. And they'd be caught in that vicious cycle for days. And so I initially got worried. Maybe these kids are sicker than I thought, because they were talking about these parts as if they had lots of autonomy and could make them do things they didn't want to, and were fighting with each other constantly. So I thought maybe they're more like multiple personalities.
Yeah.
And then I listened inside myself, and oh my God, I've got them too. And some of mine are as extreme as theirs. And so then I just got curious. And at first, I thought they were what they seemed, which is what our field typically thinks of them. And basically our culture, which is they're just extreme thoughts, or they're just internalized parental voices, or they're just out of control impulses. And when you think of them that way, you don't have many choices but to try and fight with them or ignore them, which is what I was getting my clients to do. And then I had a client who cut herself on her wrists, and I started to get her to try and fight and coerce that part into submission. And at some point, it just let me know that it wasn't really trying to hurt her, and that it actually was trying to protect her. And in listening to that, that was the first time that I actually that was like the turning point in this work, because I actually started to listen to the part rather than try to manhandle it. And it started talking about how when she was being abused as a child, it had to get her out of her body and contain the rage that would get her more abuse. And I shifted from not just being curious, but hearing that story, I had a kind of appreciation for the heroic role it played in her life. It actually literally saved her life.
Yeah.
And so I started trying to actually listen to parts of other clients that were quite extreme and suicidal or making them binge or whatever they were doing. And they all had a similar kind of secret history of how when the client was young, they had to jump in to protect. And that, in fact, they literally often still thought the client was that young. They didn't realize that the client had grown up. They were sort of frozen in that time period. And they thought they still had to protect this way. And they also carried these very extreme beliefs and emotions that had come into the client through the trauma. And then it was like a virus. These extreme beliefs and emotions would attach to the part and then drive it like a coronavirus. And as I got all that, I started to think, maybe these parts aren't what they seem. Maybe they're just good, valuable inner citizens that got forced out of their naturally valuable states into roles that can be destructive, but initially were protective. And so 40 years later now, that's all been proven quite true. And it's very radical, different kind of paradigm for understanding human beings.
The part that gets me the most and struck me so hard, and maybe it struck a chord inside me, was when you discovered that the part still thinks we're that young age.
That's right.
And that's, it was a hell of a revelation. How did you discover that?
Again, it was mainly just by being curious and not trying to manipulate. And as some of these parts were talking about why they did it, they would talk about how dangerous the environment was and how they were constantly worried about being hit by their father, for example. And I would say, well, how old do you think she is? And they'd say 5. And I'd say, no, she's older than 5. And actually, that was a big comfort to learn that she wasn't still 5. The part didn't have to keep doing this job. Yeah. So, yeah, Oteil, if I was to have you focus on some extreme thought or emotion, and if you just asked, how old do you think I am, you often will get single digits. So,
wow. It's really incredible. I think about the part that I think initially grasped me was we all have, this idea that you dealt with early on of this multiple personalities, and the fact that that was a bad thing or a negative. It's a lot of pressure to be one personality 24/7. Right. I mean, you need to have different personalities. You have to adapt and react to various circumstances. And if you are the same guy at work when you come home, or if you're that could cause quite a bit of, in the family systems idea of that system could get pretty banged up. So to me, it was like, oh, it's okay to feel like different people at different times. And those are important, valuable pieces of the, parts to the whole.
Yeah. The idea of having these inner voices or parts was pathologized by the whole multiple personality disorder movement. And, while they accurately described those patients, they also said they're sick because they have one personality that got shattered by trauma into these shards of the vase. And so the goal is to kind of put Humpty Dumpty back together again. The goal is to put them back into one mind. And so that conception is what I've been fighting against these 40 years, is the belief that having parts is a sign of pathology. Because my belief is we're born with them, and like you said, Mike, it's great to have them because you have to adapt and you have to be different people. And they all have these wonderful talents and qualities to help us in our life. But they get forced out of these valuable roles into these extreme roles by what happened to us. Yeah. And the goal of IFS is to help them unburden these extreme beliefs and emotions, get them out of where they're stuck in the past, and they will, almost like a curse has been lifted, they'll immediately change into their naturally valuable states, and then have them get to know each other and get along with each other. And so it's been a kind of miraculous journey, and it was 40 years, it was probably 35 years of loneliness. It's only recently that it's kind of caught fire, but it's it's one of those things when the gods want to punish you, they answer your prayers. So I'm totally bombarded these days. Yeah.
Well, we had another guest on, Jeffrey Mishlove. I remember watching a podcast of his, and he used the term polyphrenic. Mm-hmm. And I thought, there's a good side to this. Because like you said, they just pathologize everything. And so like to have these other personalities is just bad.
Right.
And of course, it's like, well, you shouldn't be the guy at home you shouldn't be the guy at work that you are at home, and vice versa. It could not be good.
Yeah.
And so it's great. What a huge relief to know that these parts can actually be put back into balance, I guess.
That's right.
That they were originally good.
Exactly.
Like
right.
eating is obviously good, but if it's out of balance, it could kill you. So I guess for me, the question in there that I want to ask is that how do I talk to the part or get the part to talk to me so that I'm listening? Is this does it involve like a form of hypnosis, or what's the process for doing that?
Not really. And if you wanted to try it, we could do it for a few minutes.
Okay, I'll go on the spot. Sure, why not?
Okay, Oteil. So is there a part of you you'd like to get to know better, or a part that gets in the way?
That's definitely a part that gets in the way. I feel like I know it too well. Obviously, I don't, or it wouldn't be getting in my way.
Yeah, well, you know it in a certain way, but we could try and get to know it in a different way.
Okay. Yeah, let's go for it.
Okay. Do you want to say what it is, or would you rather keep that confidential and we just work with it?
Well, I guess identifying it is key. I'm more aware of what it makes me do than what it is.
We'll go with that. What does it make you do?
It makes me isolate.
Okay.
It makes me retreat.
Got it.
From people. Like being on the road is I'm on the road right now, which is why I have this backdrop, because it's a hotel room back here. But being on the road really it makes it hard because of the loneliness part. Mm-hmm. And where I could reach out to people, I would just retreat.
Got it. Okay, you want to give this a try then?
Okay.
All right, so focus on that impulse to retreat and find it in your body or around your body.
I never thought of it that way.
Yeah, just see if you can find it. If you can't, it's okay, but sometimes you can locate it in your body or around your body.
Well, I normally have, I guess I didn't know if those were connected. I have problems with my stomach. Mm-hmm. When I get anxious or feeling bad about myself, so I guess it's in my stomach.
All right, so focus down there. And as you notice that retreating part of you, how do you feel toward it?
How do I feel towards it?
Yeah. In other words, it sounds like you wish it wouldn't do this.
Yeah, so I feel, I don't want to say mad at it, but
no, it makes sense.
Extremely frustrated by it, you know?
Yeah, you've tried to overcome it. You've tried to deal with it.
Yeah, it's exhausting. And it's, I feel a great deal of annoyance.
Okay.
Almost, on the scale from severely annoyed to mad. I'm not mad, but,
Severely annoyed. Okay.
Frustrated.
Got it. So it makes sense that you would be, but let's just see if the parts of you that don't like it and are frustrated by it could give us a little space to get to know it. So it's hard to get to know it when you're so frustrated with it.
Yeah.
You have to let you get curious about it.
Yeah. Well, it's weird because, I had a career in television when I was younger. And so, I have performance anxiety. So I put myself on television and on stage in front of thousands of people. So I guess maybe my brain sometimes thinks it's because of that and not because of the part just doing its thing in response to me feeling insecure. Because I have a tangible way of bringing it onto myself again.
Okay, that's possible, but we're going to also ask the thinking part to give us some space too. And I'm going to invite you to go back to that impulse to retreat and just focus on it again in your body and see how do you feel toward it now as we've been talking?
I see why you say it. It's young. It thinks we're young.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's deep.
Yeah. So stay with it, Otil, okay?
Yeah.
I know it's getting emotional, but just stay with it.
Oh, it's good. Wow.
Yeah, good.
This is something.
And just ask it what it wants you to know about itself and how young it is and whatever it wants you to know, and don't think. Just wait and see what comes.
God, I never thought to do this. All right, let me try
Nobody
this.
does.
Yeah, it's a whole new territory.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just trying to shield me.
That's right.
From the, it's almost like my fear is like a boogeyman. It's just trying to protect me from the boogeyman.
So let them know you get that. And as you get that, how do you feel toward it?
I mean, yeah. Wow. Definitely not mad anymore.
Good. Let it know.
Or annoyed or whatever it is. It's, yeah. This is heavy. To switch from annoyed to almost the point of being angry to being grateful. Like
Good. Yeah.
that? Wow.
Good. Yeah.
That's deep.
So just keep letting it know how grateful you are to it for trying so hard to protect you.
Boy, it's been trying hard.
And succeeding some of the time.
Yeah, almost killed me. Jesus, killed a lot of my friends. Wow. Yeah. But that's the part I was curious about. Like, it thinks I'm still like, what, 12?
Yeah.
I guess all this came on for me like in puberty. I had no abuse from my parents or anything. I had a really, good childhood.
Yeah.
But when you hit puberty and all these things come in, all the insecurities kind of pile on. And I'm thinking probably like around 12. I don't even know why that number, but yeah, I think it thinks I'm like 12 years old or something.
Okay, so let him know you get that he thinks that, and tell him how old you really are.
Yeah.
You don't have to tell us, but
Yeah.
tell him how old you really are and just see how he reacts to that information.
Quite a few years. I mean, it's hard for me to say because it's such a subjective thing, but my first thought is that it feels like I don't want to say threatened, but maybe a little disappointed because now it's been doing this job for me. Like it doesn't really know what else to do.
Okay, so that's a really good question, Otil. So ask it if it really believed it didn't have to protect you this way and it was freed up, it was liberated, what might it like to do instead inside of you?
This is heavy, man. Okay. I feel kind of scared to ask it that. But
What's the fear?
I'm not even sure. I guess I don't want to, but it's not a threatening question.
If it's scary, you don't have to ask, but
No,
it might reassure this part that it can do something else.
yeah. I mean, I don't, this is subjective, but I just hear in my head, it just says, hey, I just want to hang out. I don't even want to have to do this.
Yeah. Yeah. It's tired, right? It's tired.
I think it wants to go on my scuba diving trips with me. It's tired, just like
be your friend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How does that sound?
I mean, this is wild, man. Jeez. It's funny because I don't want to interrupt the process, but I watched a few videos. I mean, I got turned on to you a while back, months ago, and then your name came up again. And so I was watching some videos again recently, and I thought, wow, after getting reacquainted with your process, I was like, I don't know if I could do that, if it would work for me. Mm-hmm. But boy, does it work. Wow.
It really does.
Wow, man.
I so appreciate you giving it a shot, because I think it would really helps our purpose, which is to have people get a sense of how this does work and how quickly.
The fear there to do it, first I didn't think to do it. It didn't occur to me to look at it that way.
Right.
And then the other part is when you ask me to do it, then I'm afraid to do it.
Yeah.
So I see why people wouldn't naturally kind of get there. It has to be pulled out of you, or you have to be led there in a certain way. But when you are wow, that's deep, man.
When I first, I've practiced IFS with an IFS certified therapist, and you're exactly right, Oteil. It was I wanted so bad to do it, and then once it was time to do it, I was terrified to do it.
Yeah. And
then it was, as it's happening, I'm like, oh my God, it's happening. This is what I've been. Yeah. You build up and build up and build up, and it's, I mean, you couldn't have said it better, that these parts are exhausted.
Yeah.
Just absolutely exhausted, and that's the best way to describe.
Yeah.
I can't speak for anyone else, but that's what my anxiety and that's what my panic and that's what my depression feels like, is just total exhaustion. And when you look at it from this perspective of all of these parts, had to emergently clock in to save us.
Right.
And no one ever said, hey, you could punch out.
Yeah, they're like firemen.
Right.
Yeah.
They never get a break.
For decades. Maybe for some people, maybe ever.
Yeah.
They punch in when they're 6, and then when they're
like
93, they punch it. Yeah. So, I mean, for you to say that that part wants to go scuba diving with you that's beautiful to me. That's just wants to be your friend.
It wants a vacation, or a vacation from having to do that job.
That's right. Yeah.
So now then the question is okay, so what would its good job? Because you said now we could take these parts and free them of this old job that they're stuck in, thinking that I'm 12. Now, what would its original or good purpose? What does it get to do now?
It can just go scuba diving with you and be your friend. At some point, it might kind of remember what it's designed to do and might start to do that. But for now, it can just hang out.
That's great. Yeah, it needs to clock out.
Yeah.
After I'm 57 now. It's a lot of years without a vacation.
That's right. And
wow.
They're young to begin with. These parts are not adults.
But that's what I wanted to ask you. What age is the part? Is it still, or is it?
That's a great question.
Go back in and ask it. Just ask it how old it is. It'll tell you.
Yeah, of course it's 12. Of course, or whatever that age range, because it's still stuck there.
That's right.
Of course it is.
Well, it's been doing this labor-intensive job for 40, 45 years. And it's a little kid. And it's really tired.
Wow.
And all it took was for you to not be frustrated with it and listen to it.
Mm.
And that's, it's a really tough sell in this culture, but that's all it takes most of the time. It doesn't take fancy hypnotic technique or anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, this culture is really screwed because we are not getting this.
Right.
We are not getting it. I mean, the suicide rate is, and the addiction, but all of it. I mean, wow.
Exactly right. That's what I'm trying to bring, because psychiatry and psychology and the culture in general pits you against your parts.
Yes. Thank you for saying that. That's something I wanted to ask you. In looking at, earlier on in our conversation, you mentioned that you thought marriage and family therapy was like the cure, or the new. It's a new form. It's a postmodern, way of looking, solution focused and not so set in the old structure. And for this to. And just for folks who may not know, could you give a little bit of background as to like what that means, like what solution focused means, or what, we hear cognitive behavioral therapy and things like this. So internal family systems is even a step further, where we're not pitting ourselves against our parts. We're saying there's no bad parts.
That's right.
Integrating.
You all have a part in this. I don't want to speak for you, but if you could. I think that's so important for everyone to know.
The parallel would be family therapy's big insight was to say you can't take an acting out kid out of the family and tell him to cut it out and expect that to work. You have to understand the forces in the family that are forcing that kid into that role and change all that and help him be released from having to protect himself that way or to protect other family members. And it's a direct parallel to this inner system. So these parts, you can't take them and just say, stop doing it. Because you don't know what they're protecting, you don't know where they're stuck in the past, and you don't know all the other things that are allied to keep them in that role. And so that's what I did. I just took that idea from family therapy and brought it to this internal system, and it just fits really well. And family therapy was a big pendulum swing away from the pathologizing of more traditional psychoanalysis or the medical model, which is really dominating psychiatry. And then this is, like you said, a step further toward depathologizing basically everything. I could take any diagnostic category and for me is an accurate description of just a cluster of protective parts and would give you a very non-pathologized understanding of that DSM category that allows people to start to work to change it. So, it's been a long haul. And then the other thing we haven't talked about yet is as I was doing this work of having people do a piece of work like you did just now, Teal, where I was trying to get people to listen to these parts rather than fight with them. Mm-hmm. At times, they would start out doing that, but then suddenly they'd be furious with the part. And it reminded me of family sessions where I'm trying to have two people talk to each other. And as they're doing that, and I'm trying to get them to listen to each other, and suddenly one of them is furious at the other, and you look around the room and you see maybe the father is siding covertly with the daughter against the mother, and you get that father to step back in the room, and the daughter calms down and they have a better conversation. Mm. But maybe the same thing's happening in this inner system. So I began saying, can you find the one who's so furious with in this case, the withdrawing part? And could you get it to just relax in there or step back in there? And to my amazement, clients could do it just the way you did. And when they did, it was like a different person popped out, which happened here, who, seconds earlier you were frustrated and so on. You get that one to step back, and you listen, you get curious, and you listen. And while you listen, you start to have enormous compassion for this part. And so I found that over and over, that simply getting some of these parts to open space inside would release this other person who would come out the same way across clients with curiosity and compassion and confidence and calm, what we call the 8 C words of self-leadership, because I came to call that the self because when I'd ask, what part of you is that? People would say, that's not a part like these others. That's me. That's myself. So we call that the self with a capital S. And it turns out 40 years later that self with those C-word qualities, and there are 4 others that I didn't mention, is in everybody and can't be damaged and knows how to heal. Once it's released, it'll take over actually and start to heal, which is sort of what happened even in those 5 minutes we did. And is just beneath the surface of these parts, such that when they open space, it emerges spontaneously. And that's a big deal. That discovery can change everything. So, so that's what's kept me going all these 4 years.
Well, it's exciting because I think this part has had a really big job. And it's been on the job constantly. And now it's a job, it knows like it doesn't have to do that job anymore, which means it has an amazing capacity. Whatever good job it's going to do, like this thing is built for like a lot of goodness, because it's a
strong 12-year-old.
Yeah, it's powerful. I'm glad to give it a break for a while, like take vacation.
That's right.
But man, it's probably going to come back like gang. But I guess it will have me being like, hey man, reach out, like
often. Exactly right. Yeah. That's so often the case that the part wants to do the opposite of the job it was in before. So the one who makes you withdraw wants to get you out there. So,
in fact, I think it's done that a little bit, to be honest, because I've done a lot of work on myself since, let's say in the last 17 years, like since I was 40, I really like tried to just work on myself, and that part has helped me like reach out more, but I just never sat down and like talked with it before. So it still has to do some of its old job, just a lot less of it, not so much to ruin my life, but
just to be sure,
it hasn't been fired from that job totally yet, which I guess we just did.
What's up, everybody? This is Mike, and today's show is sponsored by Sunset Lake CBD, a Vermont hemp farm crafting affordable CBD products designed to help with stress and sleep without breaking the bank.
Sunset Lake CBD is a majority employee-owned hemp farm located just outside of one of our favorite places, Burlington, Vermont. For years, Sunset Lake was a dairy farm producing milk for Ben & Jerry's ice cream. We had them on the podcast. In 2019, they diversified and started growing hemp for CBD.
And Sunset Lake CBD crafts products with hemp grown on their family farm and ships them directly to the customer, cutting out all the cost associated with getting on the shelves at stores. They have CBD products for every occasion and offer tinctures, salves, edibles, coffee, smokables, and even for that anxious dog of yours, they have pet products.
Ooh, I need to get some for my dog that's barking all the time. But I'll tell you this, I use these. The Sour Bears.
So good.
They are CBD gummies. I literally, no joke, I take these every night. They help me sleep. And it's almost bedtime.
Yep. And I still, as said it before, I'll say it again. You go to a long show, you come home, my 42-year-old ankles are not what they used to be. And I rub that salve all over them and put them up, enjoy a nice cocktail, and just let it ooze right into those sore bones. And you know what, folks? All you Comes a Time fans, if you check them out at sunsetlakecbd.com and use promo code TIME, T-I-M-E, you'll get 20% off all products. That's sunsetlakecbd.com. Use promo code TIME, 20% off all products. Sunset Lake CBD, farmer-owned, Vermont-grown. Thank you.
Get you some.
And Dick, correct me if I'm wrong, but with IFS, that accessing and communicating with that one part, there are multiple other parts that are sitting back and watching and observing what Oteil just experienced, and those parts have been obviously affected by that progress as well, correct?
That's correct, yeah. And had we had more time, we could have asked this one if it protected some other part. And it may well be that it protects a younger part that was hurt somehow when you got out there, and also needs your attention. And so and the other thing that happened is just in that little piece of time, your parts started to see there is a you who could actually talk to them. There's a way you could have them all sit at a kind of conference table, and you would be the board of directors, and you would be talking about, or you would be the parent to this little family, and help them all start to get to know each other and get together. Because most people don't even know of this self. They're sort of run by their protective parts. And it's a big relief, as we found, when they can see there is somebody else in here who can lead my life and isn't 5 years or 12 years old, who actually can start running things. So this concept of getting more confidence, getting the parts to have more confidence in the self's leadership is a big part of this as well.
Man, this is amazing. And it's such a great image of what I thought polyphrenic is, or what I think it is, which is, it's not disconnected. Maybe it's just a Western society thing. I understand that we have to segregate things to analyze them and compartmentalize them, but you see it in the medical profession, it's so specialized that the foot person has no idea. It's not all integrated.
Yeah.
And that's why the holistic thing is become so popular, because God, I feel for you, man. 40 years of fighting against a great wall of China of Western, keep everything set, not integrating and synthesizing,
Yeah. It's a lot of lonely years, but
thank God you stuck with it.
Man.
I think one of the things that's, we have to, we discuss it quite a bit here on the podcast, and just talking with ourselves just about the importance of normalizing mental health and destigmatizing it, and realizing that there are different types and there are different pathways and things like that. A lot of people hear therapy and immediately they go, no, not for me. I don't need it. I'm this, I'm that. I'll just, take an Advil, kind of, if you will, and try to get through it. The thing I love about IFS is the word hope. I mean, there is hope for folks who aren't sure of those parts and it's not, we have to go all the way back through to the beginning and work our way back. And I forgot this part and I remember this, and we're out of time. And this is, we go into the self, like you said, and we look around. And that's when I experienced, when I was doing it for the first time, I ended up in a room. In a house that I used to live in. And I was looking around the room, and at first it was just an empty room. And then I started to find all of these different, like a storage bin and another door and a light switch and a blind that was down, and they all meant something. And it was all part of this experience, but I felt hopeful the whole time. It was that feeling of kind of spring cleaning, or, like painting the room over, and it just gave everything it gave therapy a sense of hope. I wasn't going through it alone. I wasn't putting on the miner's helmet and digging through the old stuff. It just felt, I can move forward. I can, and it's just, I feel because I'm fascinated by the world of therapy and all of it. I think this is absolutely so important that someone can hear that word hope and therapy in the same sentence. So thank you for that. Thank
you, Mike. Yeah, I call myself a hope merchant, and I'm proud of that. And,
I love that.
And you're right. It's the other nice thing about it is I don't have to be real clever as a therapist.
Yeah.
because I'm just pointing you in the right direction.
Yeah.
And getting you to get curious, and you're making the discoveries. It's not me giving you the interpretation of what's going on. It's all coming to you, and I'm just kind of there as your companion. So it's I know that therapy has a bad name, and rightly so in many cases, but this is quite different. So
yeah,
it really is. The cool thing about it is it's not hard to find. There's a book I've read, or a guy I know. I've read about him in a book. His name is Dr. Paul Brand. He wrote a book called The Gift of Pain. And he said the beautiful part about pain is it lets you know exactly where the problem is and how severe it is. He's like without that, you would die because you wouldn't know, oh, I have a tumor in here because I have a pain in here or whatever. It's same with psychological pain. Like you can find it right there. It's like, what's that thing? It's not some deep, long process that you have to go through. It's like quite natural.
Yeah.
But thank you for persevering through that, because it's happened a lot on our podcast. We had it's a theme, like with Stanley Krippner or the people doing psychedelic
Rick Doblin. Yeah.
Or it's all the marijuana people, the UFO people, we're talking 40, 50, 60, 70 years of just
misfit power.
The government and the society and everybody being and you have to that's a lot of time. As a cannabis user, I've been made into a criminal for, when did I start using? 17 years old or whatever, that's a long time, man. I have a marijuana medical card in Florida, but, I spent a lot of time. So thank you for persevering through that, because I'm sure the industry, psychiatry is, it's just as rigid as.
Yeah, it was challenging, but I did have a little group that it felt like Star Wars, the evil empire, and then we were this little rebel group, and I had such amazing clients and such amazing experiences with clients that just kept me going. So
nothing like success to help you go, I'm gonna stick with this.
Yeah.
What's that process like with coming up with literally developing a new theory or a new thought? Like that must have been a ton of pressure at that moment. Like, how do you take that revelation, that light bulb goes off, and then practically put it into words? Or, that must have been a really tough process for you.
That was tough, but, pretty early on, maybe, the whole thing will be 40 years old next year. So
wow.
Maybe 85 or so, I started to get, wow, this is really something big. And I hope the right person comes along who can take it where it's supposed to go, because I'm just a little kid. I was about 34 years old at the time.
Wow.
And pretty irresponsible in general. And so I'm still waiting for that guy to come along, or woman.
So I'm assuming you did this for yourself too, right?
Totally, yeah. That's the other thing that kept me going, is I could really see how much it helped me, and as I went along, I just became clearer and clearer that I had a lot of healing to do in order to bring this. Once I settled on the fact that I'm the one I've been waiting for, I'm the one that's to bring this.
Wow.
And I said,
that's it.
To do this right, I've got to do a lot of work on myself, because I had all these, I had parts that really wanted to be a guru and wanted to get all the accolades and to counter this worthlessness that I'd felt as a kid, because I grew up in a very scientific medical family, and I'm the oldest of 6 boys, and I was supposed to be that. And I had, looking back, probably ADHD and wasn't a good student. And so I drove my father crazy. And you let me know. And so I had all this worthlessness as I came out of my family. And so I needed something to counter the worthlessness. And so that kept me going for a while. And then I became the leader of a community. And I said, well, those narcissistic parts are not going to help. And I really have to do a lot of work with them. And I have. So if I'm proud of anything, I did my work, and now, people remark on how humble I seem, and it's pretty genuine. I don't need that kind of stroking all the time.
Wow.
I wish we had a better language for what it is, because, like, for me, I feel like I don't mean to be so binary about it, but when you have just like a hard scientism kind of belief, which it sounds like it's what you grew up in, I kind of go, well, I need some more of the mystical then, because this obviously isn't going to work enough for me. But that's why I say I wish I had maybe some different language. I wonder if you see it that way. Is it not necessarily a mystical thing? Like, what do you call it? Because it's not just a hard scientism,
Yeah, that's a good question. So as I moved along, I think part of the reason I was chosen to bring this is because I do have that hard science background.
Yes.
In terms of being an empiricist, and I'm not going to go beyond the data. I'm not going to be too woo-woo in that way. But for example, with self, as I saw how it couldn't be damaged, and even in people that had horrible, horrible childhoods, you get their parts to open space, it's the same damn self popped out. And as I started getting that, I couldn't reconcile that with attachment theory, for example, that says to have any of those qualities, you had to have had a certain kind of good parenting during a critical period in your childhood. And I was working with people who had been tortured on a daily basis. So at some point I had to say, standard psychology doesn't account for this finding. And I started looking around, and it turns out that virtually every spiritual tradition has a word for what I'm calling self.
Yeah.
Even though very few psychologies do. And they describe it in basically the same way.
Yeah.
I found a way to access it a lot quicker. You don't have to meditate 20 years to get to it. But it's really the same. And so it became more mystical, if you want to call it, more spiritual. And the book I just wrote this last year, No Bad Parts, I finally came out of the closet about a lot of that. And it felt good. It feels good to acknowledge that, we're playing with what ancient traditions have found all over the world. And so, yeah, it has become very, very spiritual.
Yeah,
in the process, I went from being pretty much an atheist, scientific atheist, to now I'm a big believer in a lot of things that I never thought I would.
I think it's kind of like a cargo cult. This is my new thing. I actually was brought to this because of UFOs and stuff. But the cargo cult in Papua New Guinea, that there was planes coming over and they hadn't seen planes before, and they dropped supplies for them. And so they worshipped, for lack of a better word, and they made replicas of these planes out of sticks. And so, like, anybody from our culture would take one look at it and go, that's a plane. Right? So now they didn't understand aerodynamics any more than I do. I don't know how it's that heavy and gets up, but I ride it. But, we could clearly, it doesn't take but a millisecond to go, that's a plane. So I think all the religions are kind of like that, where there's something there that they're right about. Maybe they couldn't totally grasp it all, which is part of theology, is that how could you possibly grasp that? But I think they're all right in some way, because they've left this evidence. Like this part that I was just dealing with, it's right there in Genesis when God says to Adam, "Why are you hiding from me?" And he says, "Because I was naked and ashamed." And he said, "Who told you to be ashamed?" Right? There are no bad parts.
No bad parts.
Right.
That's page 1.
That's amazing.
Page 1 is there's no bad parts. Now, I had to go to 40 to, around the mountain for 40 years for sure. And I was not raised religious. I was raised against it, but it just,
and to your point, Oteil, too, like if you look at Buddhism, the first noble truth is all of life is suffering, which is normalizing the fact that it's not always going to be a cakewalk.
We're going to,
like you said, carry your cross. Yeah. So it is that. Right. And the thing that I think too with this, between a mystic experience or a hopeful approach to therapy, also in researching and, anticipating chatting with you, is the collaboration with psychedelic medicines. It seems to me that there's, from what I've seen and experienced, and you access that self faster, and you're able to kind of clear some of the protectors out of the way, and you're able to integrate what you're learning in an imprint to kind of rewire that default mode.
Yeah, for the totally left-brained person, that can be like, bloop.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. I been trying to bring IFS to the psychedelic world and help it become the map to that territory. And just about a week ago, I spent a week with a guy named Phil Wolfson, who is sort of the ketamine maven. And we did a 6-day training with therapists learning how to do the combination of ketamine and IFS. And exactly what you said is just amazing, how with the low-dose ketamine, they would leave for about 12 minutes, and then as they came back, it was like their protectors had gone to sleep, their managers, the default managers, and they were just in a huge amount of self. And that's a big invitation for all these exiled parts to come in. Ordinarily, they don't have any access to. Yeah. And so we could do an enormous amount of work in 10, 15 minutes. Life-changing work.
Life-changing work.
It's like they're guards. They're guardians. It's like they're standing in front of you with the guns, like in front of the Buckingham Palace with the big hats.
And Oteil, when you think about it like that, you can establish a sense of self-empathy, maybe for the first time ever, and you can go, "Oh, I can actually go easy on myself because I've been on guard."
That's right.
For decades and decades and decades, as a 7-year-old, as a 10-year-old, as a 12-year-old, like no kid should have to stand guard.
No, for real. It's exhausting.
But I'm sure, Dick, has there ever been a percentage of, how many people have guards? Obviously we can't, quantify it mathematically, but like everyone's got a trauma. Everyone's got a guard. It's obviously on a scale, but, I'm sure I couldn't imagine really anyone being. Some therapies don't adhere with certain folks. Some people don't. IFS has to have a pretty incredible, attraction rate or whatever you may call it.
Yeah, we do well. All of our outcome studies are very impressive, and some of it is the culture has to change, because this is such a rugged individualistic culture, especially for men, that if you get a trauma, not only now do you have that pain from the trauma or that terror or that worthlessness, but we all want to get away from it. We're taught to just move on, don't look back, just let it all go. And we think we're just locking away the memories, but in fact, we're locking away the parts of us that were hurt the most, which generally are these very young, 12-year-old or whatever they are, parts of us that just because they got hurt now are locked up. And if we could reverse that so that when somebody's bullied in school, they go to the part that's hurt right afterwards, and they embrace it, and they don't lock it up, then you don't need all this protection, because the reason you need all the protection is because you've got all this vulnerability locked away, and anything could trigger it at any moment. And so all these protectors have to, be the guards at Buckingham Palace to keep that from happening.
I mean, what a relief it must. I'm excited. Are there IFS therapists in Florida? Because
everywhere.
I'm thinking, if my parts are now free to do the good things,
limitless, dude.
that they're free. Oh, man, my life can be like,
Totally.
a bad feeling comes up and the part goes, "You okay?" And I'm like, "I'm good. I'm 57." It's like, all right, because I'm having fun fishing here.
It's so funny. And it's something that I definitely wanted to ask you, Dick, about these fleeting when you say, like, you leave on a psychedelic, you leave, come back, transcendent moments during meditation. When you have that kind of, I consider it to be a very light feeling, not so heavy, not so burdened. A lot of those tend to be, you have an expansion and then there's a contraction. It will last a certain amount of time, or it'll, with IFS, do you feel that the half-life, like the success in the marathon versus the sprint has been kind of, I think you know what I'm trying to say. Like, does it last longer than some of the other type of behavioral therapies?
Yeah, well, it does, because it becomes a life practice. It's not like you do one session and you're healed and then you just go on your way.
Right.
My advice to you would be, every day for the next month or so, check in with that guy and just remind him and let him know you're thinking of him, and next time you go scuba diving, he's coming with you, and you love him now that you know who he really is. And if you do that, this will stick. Yeah. If you don't do that, he's going to feel abandoned and he's going to go back. So, but people can do it on their own. Right. So that's one of the ways it's different from a lot of therapies.
I mean, it's almost 180 degrees, because it's like you're in your mind, even if they aren't telling you this specifically, it feels like you're saying, we have to banish this part, stop. Almost like don't exist. Yeah. Right. And it's like, this is like 180 degrees from that. It's like,
no
hey, man,
parts.
sorry you've been stuck doing this all these decades. Thank you. And I love you. And man, take a vacation. Like, let's go scuba diving. That's so radical. Just wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's very cool listening to you guys get this. So I really appreciate it.
It's just, we've been dying to have you on. I mean, it's been, I've watched so many videos that I think you're doing really, really groundbreaking work that's going to change the face of psychotherapy forever.
This is how you change the culture.
This is how you do it.
The culture is so stuck for now. I mean, obviously we're coming out of it. I think we're even being pushed out of it, because the reality is, you look at the psychic trauma that our whole society is under now, with the shootings and just like, that's bad.
It's really bad.
I think we can finally go, all right, this isn't working. Like, whatever we think is like, we're so arrogant about it and we're so advanced about, this shit is not working.
That's exactly right.
But it's changing the culture seems so daunting, but this is the way to do it. As individuals get freed, like, how can you not want to try it? Like,
yeah.
Dick, do you feel that there's that cultural shift kind of coming in the from where you stand as in your field, that therapy and acknowledging your mental health is just as important as, say, getting your cholesterol checked or getting your heart checked or getting your colonoscopy and things like that? Do you feel like it's starting to be more normalized and more accepted in the mainstream?
Yeah, but unfortunately, it's still a pathologized kind of mental health, so that getting checked is like give you a diagnosis and some medication.
Yeah.
Rather than let's go find the parts that are giving you these symptoms. and start to listen to them. So I'm hoping it can be both, and I think if people got that it isn't therapy as usual, but there's a way to actually listen inside, and you're doing most of it yourself, that I think it would be destigmatizing as well. So anyway, that's the grand vision, and it's not going to happen in my lifetime, but I feel like this is one thread that actually, with some others, could really change things.
I think you got a great ball rolling, snowball rolling downhill.
Be happy to turn it into an avalanche.
Yeah, I mean, it really makes me think of like how this is gonna really help me with raising my children.
That's true, yeah.
You know?
Yeah, because when you're polarized with one of your parts, or you're angry at it, or then when your kid acts like one of your parts, you're gonna treat them the same way, or her.
Oh man, that's so true. Oh.
Yeah, the apple in the tree. Yeah. Can for folks who are maybe interested in finding out about IFS in their area, could you direct our listeners to a place to find that information?
Yeah, we have a directory on our website, which is ifs-institute.com, and happy to recommend somebody in your area, Teal. And
I'm on this, dude.
There are a lot of people that do it on Zoom too, so it doesn't actually have to be nearby.
That's how ifs-institute.com. Yeah.
Okay.
That's how I when I did it, it was during the latter part of the pandemic, so it was on Zoom, and it's really, really profound, really helpful. Yeah, I mean, really, really beautiful, and it felt a bit overwhelming at the moment because it's like, oh man, how many parts are actually in here?
Yeah,
like that was a moment where I was kind of like, because you do feel them if you're open to it, and if you're like, oh, there's quite a few in here.
There's quite a few, yeah. And when you open the door, they rush the gate, because they've been waiting and waiting.
He's finally here. So you go, hey, everyone, take a number.
First. Well, we just say, okay, everybody's going to get a turn. You can do it one at a time.
Take your time. Yeah.
But what a great team you have afterwards. It's like, this is the strongest team ever because they've never been off the job. Like after whatever break you're going to give them. Yeah. Man, wow.
Yeah.
I
genuinely can't thank you enough for what you're doing because, you mentioned just in passing in that last, statement you made, but we're doing the work. The patient is doing the work. The fear that so many men have about therapy is they don't want to be talked at. They don't want to be told what they're feeling is wrong. They don't want to be, they're like, demasculated or whatever it may be. But no, I'm not telling you, you do the work. You do it. Talk to your parts. You ask them that's just so groundbreaking. Like you said, Oteil, 180 degrees.
Well, we've made it into an ideal, like to suffer stoically, the stiff upper lip.
Yeah.
Right.
That like this a statue. It's like, man, I'm not a statue. I'm flesh and blood, dude. That's not going to work.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And the other thing is the language is very helpful because it's one thing to think, I yell at my wife and I'm a bad person because I do that. It's another thing to think there's a protective part of me that takes over and makes me yell at my wife, and it's protecting this little boy in there that was so hurt by my mother, and it's just to protect her, and it's my responsibility to keep it from doing that. But it isn't who I am, it doesn't define who I am. So that helps too. Yeah.
I hope we can find a language, just only to circle back around to that for a second, just because I feel like with so many people, especially in this culture, to have to like go, well, we're going to have to deal with something like on a spiritual basis or a mystical basis. Then it's like the wall goes right up.
Yeah, true.
Their part comes right back in. No.
And also, Oteil, insurance is not going to pay for a mystical experience. So ask Medicare to pay for a, meeting yourself. That's a toughie.
I think you doing this and I guess I have to read your latest book, but to find a language where this could guide people into trying it without putting the barrier up, to say, okay, that's essentially, this is like a spiritual thing we're going to have to do, because some people just can't. They roll their eyes, and it's like, I guess you'd rather feel bad than just be open-minded.
Well, it's the devil, right?
And I was one of them. So I get that.
Yeah. Well, we can't thank you enough. Honestly, it's absolutely an honor to have you here with us today, and thank you.
I've loved talking to both of you. Really, it's been a treat.
Well, thank you.
Come back and join us again sometime soon. Maybe we'll have you and Rick on, and we'll do.
That'd be fun. It'd be great fun.
That'd be a blast. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and please check out ifsinstitute.com for more information.
Thanks, Dick.
Thank you, Dick.
Thank you both.